Hey guys, welcome to the Fantasy Football Endgame. I'm Pierre, and with me is Chris. We're here to help you win, and we're going to go over some of the wide receivers you should consider benching this week heading into week 2. We already covered our must-start receivers, and of course, I already talked about running backs as well. Check out those videos when you're done here. Now, speaking of start-sit, you have those tough lineup decisions to make just days, sometimes hours before opening kickoff. That's where we come in. We do our live show here on YouTube to help you make those tough decisions. And we try to answer all your questions, but sometimes we just can't because there's so many. So we are now expanding to 2. That's right, 2 shows in order to answer your questions. One of them will be Saturday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, free for anybody to join and ask your questions. And then we're going to have a special members only start sit show where you guarantee to have your answer. We guarantee your question will be answered by us. All right. So if you want more information on that, check out the link in the description below and find out how to do that. All right, but let's get into our must-sit players for week 2. We're talking about wide receivers here. Chris, give me a name that you think should be on fantasy benches.
I'm going to say Robby Anderson. And I know if you just look at his fantasy points, you're going to be happy because he had 57 yards and a touchdown, but that was his only catch of the entire game. He only had 3 targets in the entire game. And now they're going up against the New Orleans Saints defense, who just made Aaron Rodgers look like the worst version of Sam Darnold that we've ever seen. So I don't see how this version of Sam Darnold gets it done in any way. And how are you going to trust his number 4 target option in Robby Anderson or whatever he is right now against this defense? No way you can trust him at all. He's got to be on your bench.
Yeah, Anderson had a nice season, in 2020, but that was without Christian McCaffrey for most of the year, let's face it. So he's just not going to get the same target share. All right, so speaking of target share, Brandin Aiyuk, you're probably counting him as kind of an every week starter. His target share was approximately 0 in week 1. It was all about Debo. But here's what's interesting. You may or may not have heard. Now we hear some stuff on Monday coming out that he's being called out by his coach, Kyle Shanahan, something about learning to be a pro. It kind of sounds like a situation where something off the field happened or there's something personal, some beef going on. Who knows what it is? But it seems like it wasn't a coincidence that Aiyuk had no action on the field. This could be something that lingers. Even if not, we know that Debo looked great and, the running game was good. It's not guaranteed that Aiyuk is going to have much involvement in the passing game. So I think the situation, it's best to wait and see what happens because he could be blanked again, and you do not want that. You'd rather take a chance on somebody else, at least putting up some points in your lineup. So as of right now, I'm holding off Aiyuk until I see what the deal is. All right, Chris, who else should be on benches?
I'm going to go with a guy who I still think is going to have a nice second year, and that's Michael Pittman. Didn't really get it done in week 1. The good news was he was second on the team in targets as far as wide receivers go. The bad news is both Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines had more targets than him. Now he gets a brutal matchup against that Rams secondary. I mean, they did a great job neutralizing Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson had 11 targets, but still couldn't really get anything going. I just don't see how Pittman does anything this week after what we saw last week. It's probably going to be another game where they're down big and Carson Wentz is dumping off to the running backs and doesn't have time to throw and can't, get the ball down the field. So I think you got to wait at least another week for Michael Pittman. I still think it's going to happen this year eventually, but right now, better to keep him on your bench until a better matchup presents itself.
Yeah, Pittman was outproduced and out targeted by Zach Pascal, who had those 2 touchdowns. Pittman, I think he'll be fine long term, like you said, but this is not the week to trust him against that defense for sure. Now, my next pick is going to surprise some people, but this is more of an extension of what I've been saying in the offseason. I just have the feeling Chase Claypool is going to be a bust this year, and I'll keep saying it until I'm proven wrong. So it is not about Claypool himself. It's actually more about Big Ben. So for me, you might notice Big Ben has something, condition known as noodle arm. That's right. He cannot throw the ball down the field very much anymore. He does it a lot. He just doesn't do it very well. Okay, so he did connect with Claypool a few times last year. His deep ball accuracy is among the worst in the league. So you're waiting on that. That's basically how they use Claypool. He is just like Michael Gallup was used in Dallas last year. Just go deep, run a straight line, and we'll chuck it up and hope for the best. That's just not going to work because teams are hip to that. First of all, they're going to cover Claypool a little bit more closer, but Big Ben, he just doesn't have that in his repertoire anymore. Sorry to say. It's not even about the matchup, right? The Raiders, I mean, that's not a scary defense. I just don't see Claypool hitting those big plays, and I think he's going to disappoint more often than not. And in this particular matchup, well, I'll just say that based on the way the Raiders offense looked Monday night, I'm not too worried about them putting up a ton of points against the Steelers defense and Pittsburgh needing to throw it deep. So, you know what? I think just like Chris, you love Najee Harris as a must start. I think Chase Claypool is a must sit for similar reasons. All right. Who else do you think is a must sit at wide receiver?
Well, I want to talk about a rookie, Jaylen Waddle, who had a very nice first game, 4 catches, 61 yards, and a touchdown. But I think he doesn't repeat that this week. Going up against that Buffalo defense, I've talked about him a couple times now. This defense is elite. All across the defense, it's elite. Not only that, you got Will Fuller coming back from his suspension. That's going to hurt Waddle's target share in this game. So I just think the combination of Fuller coming back, being up against his tough defense, I think the whole Miami offense is going to struggle. To be honest, I had Gaskin as the sit in our running back videos. Now I have Waddle as a sit because it's just tough for me against this Buffalo defense. I think they're just going to be one of those defenses that when your guys are playing against them, you're just going to have to really, either try to find better options, or if you don't, you're just going to have to accept that it might be a down game for that player because the Bills really do have one of the league's best defenses. So I like what Waddle did last week. I just don't think there's going to be a repeat this week. I think if you have better options, you should leave Waddle on your bench.
And the Bills do have an improved pass rush too. They're already a good defense, but with rookie Greg Rousseau and Gross Matos maybe taking a step forward, that's a defense to look out for. Also, I'm a big fan of the Cleveland defense, not a big fan of the Texans offense. So look, I know Brandin Cooks had a really good game in week 1. So did a lot of the Texans because, well, they played Jacksonville, who it looks like will be the only team in the league possibly worse than Houston. That's the Jaguars. It's not going to be the same. They're going to the dog pounding Cleveland. And so Cooks will get targeted a fair amount. He might come away with some big catches, but you can't count on that. And I think this is going to be where reality kind of slaps them in the face. So Cooks, I get it. If you want to start him, that's fine. But just know that he's going to be a boom bust option. I'm kind of betting on the bust because this is still not overall a good offense. And they're going into a really tough situation. So if I have somebody with more upside, or at least with a safer floor, I'm going to start him over Cooks. So we've talked about some of the guys we think should be on your bench. We're going to end this with some of the guys that, well, it's hard to say you just flat out bench them, but let's just say these are some top flight receivers that we just expect a dud week from. So let's start with you, Chris. Who is your dud of the week?
Yeah, this was a tough choice, honestly, but I'm going to say Amari Cooper coming off a monster week 1 performance. And the reason being, I know that people are going to say, oh, that was the Bucs. Well, the Bucs' weakness is their secondary. The Chargers, well, they really have a lot of strengths on defense, their pass rush and their secondary. But the big thing for me about the Chargers is they finally have Derwin James back and healthy. He played every snap on Sunday. And I think that was a big reason why Terry McLaurin kind of struggled out there. Obviously, losing Fitzpatrick didn't help either. But I think that was a big reason. Now, I don't think Cooper is going to get completely shut down. And again, these aren't guys that we're saying you have to bench this guy. I'm just saying you got a monster performance from him last week. You got a week winning performance from him last week. Don't expect that again. I think he'll still have a solid day, but don't expect maybe even wide receiver 1 numbers this week, because I really do think Derwin James is going to transform this secondary, and it's going to start, or it's going to help, or it's going to hurt Amari Cooper in week 2.
Yeah, hate to say it, but Cooper's not going to do that every week. That was a game that was just crazy high scoring back and forth. He's kind of boom bust as well, but I hear what you're saying there. Definitely a different situation. And so I know with Julio Jones, it's hard to say that you ever bench one of the best receivers of this generation. It's a different situation now. He's not in Atlanta, doesn't have Matt Ryan thrown to him. Tannehill's a quality quarterback. It's just not the same situation. He's the number 2 receiver there behind A.J. Brown. But interesting, now we're hearing that, kind of like with the Aiyuk situation, maybe Julio's in the doghouse because he got called out by his coach publicly for a stupid penalty. Not the word he used, but you catch my drift. So is he really catching on? Maybe he isn't meshing with this team. Maybe there's going to be a learning curve here as far as the offense and the chemistry with him. I don't know. We'll see. But I'm just saying there's a lot of risk going involved. I know some people just avoided Julio during draft season because they didn't think that he would acclimate to the Titans. So if you want to sit him, I wouldn't blame you. But right now, at the very least, I'll say I don't expect a whole lot from him in week 2. All right, so that does it for this episode. Again, catch our must-start receivers and, of course, running backs. You got to know who to start, who to sit. And check the link in the description below. Join us this weekend as we help you make all those tough lineup decisions.